The ball rolls to a stop at his feet. Riker Kong steps forward and picks it up himself, the way he rarely does anything anymore. He straightens, smiles automatically at the three boys standing at the edge of the stone path, and for half a second it's nothing. Just kids. Just a lost ball. Then his smile falters. He notices the eyes first. Then the dimple pressed into the same left cheek on all three faces. Then the tilt of Camden's head, watching him. Exactly the angle Riker uses without knowing it when something doesn't add up. Those boys have his face. Someone whispers, and the words move through the garden faster than the music can cover them. Riker's grip tightens around the ball until his knuckles go pale. His pulse climbs into his throat. For a moment the tent, the roses, the 300 guests all blur at the edges. And the only things left in focus are three small faces staring back at him like they already know exactly who he is. The party had been built for a night like this. White roses and gold light on Chicago's Gold Coast. Senators and CEOs trading handshakes under the tent. 2 helicopters resting on the back lawn. Riker had smiled through most of it on autopilot. None of it had touched him. He'd felt like a man watching his own engagement happen to someone else. Across the city, Simone Brooks didn't have time to feel anything but rain. Her minivan had died 2 blocks from the museum, and she'd turned the walk into a game before the boys could complain. Kellen hooped. Briggs narrated the whole thing in a deep announcer voice. Camden walked quieter, watching the rain hit the pavement, saving his words for something that mattered. The ball got away from Briggs near the park entrance and rolled through an open gate into a garden full of tuxedos and evening gowns. Nobody planned it. It just happened. Kellen reaches him first, already talking. "Mister, that's ours. Can we have it back?" He's pointing at the helicopters before Riker can answer, asking if they're real, if they fly fast. Briggs arrives seconds later, grinning, cracking a joke about crashing a fancy wedding that pulls a nervous laugh from a nearby guest. Camden comes last, doesn't reach for the ball at all, just studies Riker's face a moment longer. "You smile like us," Camden says. Nobody near them laughs. Simone reaches the gate seconds behind, calling their names, and then she sees him. Her hand drops slowly from its wave. She doesn't gasp, doesn't say his name, though it catches somewhere behind her teeth before she swallows it back down. Instead, she steps forward and draws the boys in against her sides, one arm around each of the outer 2, a motion so quick and practiced it looks like nothing at all. Her fingers, pressed against Briggs's shoulder, tremble just slightly. She hides it by tightening her grip. Riker feels something surface from a place he'd locked years ago. Coffee on a cold morning. Laughing until her knees gave out by the lake. A hand held so tight it left an ache he never told anyone about. "How old are they?" he asks, quiet. 6? 7? "They're 5, Simone says. His jaw shifts barely. He doesn't answer. His eyes move from Camden to Briggs to Kellen and back to Simone, doing math in front of 300 witnesses whose phones are already rising. The whispers have turned into a current now. Guests lean toward each other. A woman near the flowers lifts her phone higher, angling for a clearer shot. A photographer hesitates, lens halfway up, unsure if he's allowed to want this photo as badly as he does. 2 men near the tent line straighten without being told to. Dark suits, calm faces, already scanning the crowd the way men do when they've been trained to see a problem before it becomes one. "Sir," one of them says, low enough for only Riker and Simone to hear. "The chairman would like the area cleared. The effect is immediate." A senator mid-sentence stops talking. A board member who hasn't lowered his voice all night suddenly does. Someone's champagne glass pauses halfway to their mouth. Nobody argues. Nobody asks who gave the order. They simply step back the way people do when they understand, without being told, exactly whose night this actually is. Riker takes a step towards Simone anyway. "Wait," he says, quiet, almost to the man beside him. The hand that settles near his shoulder is polite. It is also immovable. Simone is already being guided back through the gate before Riker can find another word. A few feet away, Celeste hasn't spoken. She isn't glaring at Simone. She's watching Riker's face, searching it for something she doesn't have a name for, and beneath her composure something closer to fear than jealousy moves across her features. Riker watches the rain swallow Simone and the boys back into the dark. His hands curl slowly at his sides. Then he turns toward the men who just moved his own engagement like pieces on a board, and his voice comes out low, steady, colder than anyone at that party has ever heard from him. Get my grandfather. Now, before we jump back into the story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. If you're already hooked, take a second to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Now, Riker had just given one order that nobody in that garden dared to ignore. The phone rings at 6 in the morning and Riker almost doesn't answer it. When he does, the voice on the other end belongs to his head of records, and the man sounds like he hasn't slept either. The warehouse audit files from 7 years ago, the man says. The ones you asked for last night. They're gone. Riker sits up straighter. Gone how? Purged. 3 years ago. Signed off by a compliance officer who resigned the same month and left the country. I can't find a forwarding address. I can't find a next of kin. It's like he never worked here. Riker doesn't say anything for a moment. He spent 15 years building a company on the belief that every number, every record, every signature has a trail. Somebody wanted this particular trail to end. Across the city, Simone stands at her kitchen counter long after the boys have gone to school, staring at nothing. Kellen had asked again that morning, buttering his toast like the question weighed nothing at all. Is that man gonna come find us? She told him she didn't know. It was the first time in 6 years she'd told one of her sons the truth by accident instead of by choice. She checks the locks twice before she leaves the house. She's never done that before. Riker starts pulling threads the only way he knows how, quietly, through people who owe him favors instead of people who report to him directly. He finds a woman named Odette Marchand, who ran the literacy nonprofit that shared a wall with the audited warehouse 7 years back. Her number still works. Her voice changes the moment he says his name. I don't have anything to say about that, she tells him, and hangs up before he can ask a single question. He calls back. It goes straight to voicemail. He drives to the address listed for the nonprofit and finds a print shop where her office used to be. The woman behind the counter telling him the location changed hands twice since then, and she's never heard the name Marchand in her life. It isn't the wall that bothers him. It's how clean the wall is. Somebody didn't lose these records. Somebody scrubbed them. He remembers, without meaning to, the first time he saw her. Not Odette. Simone. Standing on a folding chair in that same building, arguing with a roll of tape that wouldn't cooperate, asking the stranger in the expensive suit to hold the ladder steady because her hands were full. He hadn't told her who he was. She hadn't asked. For 20 minutes that afternoon, he'd simply been a man holding a ladder, and something about that had felt more valuable than every deal he'd ever closed. He doesn't let himself sit in the memory long. There's too much missing to explain it away as coincidence. At the office, his assistant tells him a scheduled meeting with the company's original security contractor has been canceled. No reason given. When Riker calls the contractor directly, the man is polite, apologetic, and completely unwilling to discuss anything from 7 years back. I think it's best if that stays in the past, Mr. Kong, he says, and something in his tone makes it clear the words aren't really his own. Riker starts noticing things he wouldn't have noticed a month ago. A car that idles a little too long outside his building. An executive who used to greet him warmly now finding reasons to leave a room before Riker enters it. Nobody threatens him. Nobody has to. The silence around him has a shape now, deliberate and total, and he understands that shape didn't happen by accident. He goes to Simone's house that evening, unannounced, and she doesn't let him pass the porch. You can't just show up, she says, arms crossed, voice even. though her eyes keep flicking toward the street behind him like she's checking to see if he's alone. "I'm not here to push," he says. "I just want to understand what happened to us back then. Then understand this. Whatever you're looking for, digging it up doesn't just put you at risk." She stops herself before finishing the sentence, and for a moment something crosses her face that looks less like anger and more like fear worn so long it's become a kind of armor. She doesn't explain what she meant. She shuts the door gently instead of slamming it, which somehow lands harder. He doesn't push his way in. He drives home with her unfinished sentence echoing louder than anything she actually said. The boys, at least, are curious in a way Simone isn't. Kellen waves at him through the window before Simone pulls the curtain shut. 2 days later, walking home from school with his brothers, Briggs spots Riker's car parked half a block down and runs over before Simone can stop him, peppering him with questions about the helicopters again. Camden hangs back near the sidewalk, watching, saying nothing, but he doesn't look away this time, and that alone feels like something has shifted, even if neither of them could say what. Late that night, Riker sits alone with a manila envelope his physician sent over 3 days earlier. Inside is the lab's cell number and a single line: "Results ready upon request." He's had it in his desk drawer for 3 days. He hasn't opened it. Part of him already knows what it will say. Another part of him understands that once he knows for certain, there's no version of his life that goes back to before. He's reaching for the envelope when his phone rings. It's Warren Castellano, the investigator he brought in the week before, and his voice carries none of its usual calm. "Mr. Kong, I need you to listen to me carefully. I pulled property records tied to that Shell account you asked about. Somebody flagged my search 2 hours after I ran it. My office was broken into tonight. Nothing taken. Just gone through. Somebody wanted me to know they were watching." Riker's grip tightens on the envelope in his hand. "There's something else," Castellano says. "The compliance officer who purged those files 7 years ago. I found him, or I found where he was. He died 18 months ago. Officially a car accident upstate New York. Except there's no accident report on file with the county. There's just a death certificate and a closed case number that leads nowhere." Neither of them says anything for a long moment. "Whoever's protecting this," Castellano finally says, "they're not amateurs and they're not finished." Riker looks down at the unopened envelope still sitting on his desk, the answer to who his sons are resting quietly inside it, and understands, for the first time, that finding out the truth might cost him something he isn't ready to lose. Riker doesn't open the envelope that night. He drives to his grandfather's estate instead, uninvited at 11 o'clock, because something about Castellano's voice on the phone has made staying still impossible. The chairman is awake. He's always awake. He sits in his study with a single lamp burning, a chessboard set up on the table beside him, though no one else is in the room to play against. He doesn't look surprised to see his grandson standing in the doorway. "You've been busy," the chairman says, not looking up from the board. "Someone's erasing records tied to Simone. Tied to 7 years ago. I want to know who." The chairman moves a piece, considers it, moves it back. "Some doors close for a reason, Riker. Opening them again rarely returns what you think you lost." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you need tonight." Riker studies his grandfather's face, searching for something. A flicker, a tell, anything that would confirm the shape of suspicion forming in his chest. He finds nothing. The old man's calm is total, practiced over 60 years of never once letting anyone read what he didn't want read. Riker leaves without another word, more unsettled by the silence than he would have been by a direct threat. The following afternoon, he takes the boys to the park near Simone's house. A small victory earned only after 3 more visits and a phone call where he simply asked, without pushing, whether he could see them for an hour. Simone had agreed on the condition she stayed the entire time, sitting on a bench 20 feet away, watching every second of it. Briggs makes him play tag and declares him surprisingly fast for an old guy. Kellen wants to know if he can ride in the helicopter someday. Camden sits beside him on the bench for a while, quiet, before finally speaking. Mom cries sometimes. At night. She thinks we don't hear. Riker doesn't answer right away. He looks over at Simone, who has no idea what her son just said, and something in his chest tightens in a way money has never once been able to fix. She's strong, Riker says finally. Stronger than almost anyone I know. Camden nods like that was the answer he needed, and doesn't say anything else about it. Later that week, Celeste finds Riker standing at his office window long after the building has emptied out. She doesn't ask him directly what's wrong. She's learned, over the 2 years they've been together, that Riker answers questions on his own schedule or not at all. Instead, she stands beside him, quiet, and after a while says, "You've been somewhere else for weeks. I don't know where, and I'm starting to think I don't want to." He doesn't deny it. She waits for him to say something that would make the growing unease in her chest disappear. And when he doesn't, she leaves without another word, torn between the life she spent years building beside him and a feeling she can't yet name, that the ground beneath both of them has already started to shift. That night, Castellano calls again, later than before, his voice low. "I found something. A storage unit, registered under a name that traces back through 2 shell companies to the same holding entity we've been chasing. I got inside before anyone stopped me." A pause. "There's surveillance footage in here, Mr. Kong. Old tapes. Digitized files. Someone kept records they were supposed to have destroyed. What's on them? I haven't gone through all of it, but there's a folder labeled with a date. 7 years back. The same week everything fell apart between you and Simone." Another pause, longer this time. "And there's a photograph. You and a woman I don't recognize at a resort. Except the timestamp on the file metadata doesn't match the timestamp printed on the photo itself. Somebody built this, Mr. Kong. Recently enough that the file properties still show it." Riker's hand goes still around the phone. "There's one more thing," Castellano says. "The storage unit is registered under a corporate name I've seen before. It's the same holding entity that owns 3 buildings in Chicago your grandfather's company leased 20 years ago. I don't know what that means yet, but I don't think it's nothing." Behind Riker, his office door opens without a knock. His assistant stands there, pale, phone in hand. "Mr. Kong, it's the lab. They said it's urgent. They need you to come in tonight." They wouldn't say why over the phone. Riker looks down at the manila envelope still sitting unopened on his desk, then back up at the door, and for the first time since the boys walked into that garden, he isn't sure which truth is about to break him first. The market opens at 9:30, and by 9:42, Riker's company has lost $4 billion in value. He watches it happen from his office window, no laptop open, no phone in his hand, just the quiet hum of the city below while 3 floors down his own board scrambles to save what's left of a name that took 15 years to build. By noon, 2 networks are running the story on a loop. Business anchors who once called him the most disciplined CEO in America now use words like deception and hidden family, like they're reading a script written just for this moment. His phone doesn't stop buzzing. He lets most of it go to voicemail. When his chief financial officer finally reaches him, the man doesn't bother easing into it. 6 board members have called for an emergency vote. 3 major investors pulled out this morning. If this keeps moving, we lose control of the company by Friday. Riker doesn't argue. He doesn't call an emergency press conference, doesn't hire a crisis team, doesn't do any of the things his advisors beg him to do. He simply asks one question. Are the boys safe? When the answer is yes, that's the only thing that actually settles in his chest. Across the city, Simone's quiet street has stopped being quiet. 2 news vans park outside her house by mid-morning, cameras aimed at a front door that stayed shut since sunrise. A neighbor she's waved to for 6 years now watches her from behind a curtain instead of coming outside. At the boys' school, the principal calls her into a private office, gentle but visibly uneasy. asking careful questions about media attention and whether the school needs to prepare for anything. Kellen comes home asking why a man with a camera followed him at recess. Briggs doesn't joke around at dinner. Camden barely speaks at all, watching his mother's face for something she isn't giving him, an answer she doesn't have. That night, unmarked cars appear at both ends of the block, engines off, no branding, no explanation. Simone doesn't call anyone. She doesn't have to. By morning, the reporters are gone. The street empty again, though nobody ever sees who made that happen. At the school, the principal receives a private call from a number she doesn't recognize, and afterward, no more questions are asked about the family in the news. Riker never mentions any of it. Not to Simone, not to the boys, not to a single reporter who tries to get a comment from him about his act of kindness. He simply keeps doing it quietly, every day, asking nothing in return. 3 days later, Chairman Kong summons him to the estate. No raised voice greets him this time either, just his grandfather seated by the same chessboard, one hand resting on a black knight he hasn't moved in minutes. "You understand what's happening," the chairman says. "The council believes you've become compromised. They believe the boys, and the woman, are now a liability the family cannot survive. They're my sons. They're a weakness the wrong people can use against you, against all of us." The chairman finally looks up. "You have one choice left, Riker. The company, the council, everything your father and I built for you, or the woman and the children. You cannot keep both." Riker doesn't hesitate the way he expects himself to. "My children." The chairman studies him for a long moment, something unreadable passing behind his eyes, and then he simply nods, the smallest motion, final as a door closing. "Then you understand what you've chosen to give up." Riker leaves the estate that night no longer the heir to anything. He doesn't yet understand how far that choice will reach. 2 days later, his phone rings at 6 a.m. Simone's voice on the other end doesn't sound like her at all. "They're gone," she says. "The boys. I went to wake them and their beds are empty and the back door was unlocked and I didn't hear anything. Riker, I didn't hear anything at all." He's in his car before she finishes the sentence. The house is exactly as she described it. Quiet, undisturbed, nothing broken, nothing forced. Whoever came for the boys knew the house, knew the schedule, knew exactly when nobody would wake. No ransom call arrives. No demand, no message, nothing that would suggest rival enemies looking for leverage. Riker understands, with a cold clarity that turns his stomach, that this isn't the work of anyone outside his family. This is the council. This is his own blood, showing him exactly what loyalty costs when a man chooses wrong. Simone sits on the floor of Camden's empty room, not screaming, not crying, just still, holding one small shoe that didn't make it into whatever bag was packed for 3 sleeping boys taken in the dark. Riker kneels beside her and doesn't know what to say, because for the first time in his entire life, there's no amount of money, no phone call, no favor he can call and that solves this. "This is because of me," he says quietly. Simone doesn't answer. She doesn't need to. The silence between them says everything neither of them can afford to say out loud. He spends the next 2 days calling in every resource he has left, private security, old contacts, anyone who might know where his own family would hide 3 children they consider a liability. Every door closes. Every contact goes quiet. Whoever moved the boys did it the way the chairman does everything, clean, patient, untraceable. On the 3rd night, his phone rings from a number he doesn't recognize. An old man's voice, careful, deliberate. "Mr. Kong, my name is Walter Ashcombe. I worked as your mother's personal attorney for 11 years, before she passed." A pause, long enough that Riker's chest tightens waiting for it to end. "I've been instructed to contact you only under very specific circumstances. Those circumstances have now occurred." "What circumstances?" The old man's voice drops lower, almost gentle. "Your mother knew everything, Mr. Kong. Everything that happened 7 years ago. She tried to stop it before it started. Walter Ashcombe's office sits above a quiet bookstore in Lake Forest, the kind of place that hasn't changed its furniture in 30 years. Riker sits across from him while the old man unlocks a fireproof box that's been sealed since before the triplets were born. Inside are letters in his mother's handwriting, dated 7 years back, addressed to no one, meant only to be found. Bank records showing a wire transfer she tried to block the week Simone received those fabricated photographs. A recording, her voice, thin but certain, describing a conversation she overheard between Chairman Kong and Alden Hawthorne, the two of them agreeing on a plan to end a relationship the family considered a threat to its bloodline and its business both. She tried to warn Riker. She died of a sudden illness 3 weeks before she could. She hid it here, Ashcombe says, because she didn't trust anyone inside the family to protect it. She trusted me instead. Riker doesn't cry reading his mother's last written words. He sits with them, silent, absorbing 7 years of grief that finally has a shape and a name attached to it. Within days, copies of that evidence reach federal investigators already circling Alden Hawthorne's finances. Wire fraud, falsified records, a trail of forged documents 7 years deep. Alden attempts to leave the country on a private flight out of a small airfield outside Napa Valley and is stopped on the tarmac before the plane ever takes off. Cameras catch him being escorted off in handcuffs, and for the first time in decades, his name trends for reasons his foundation can't spin. Chairman Kang's world doesn't collapse all at once. It erodes, senior council members quietly stepping back once the evidence becomes public, partners severing ties. The empire he spent 60 years assembling losing pieces of itself one departure at a time. Nobody arrests him. Nobody needs to. Power built on fear only survives as long as people are still afraid, and fear doesn't hold once the truth is standing in the room. The boys are found 2 days after Ashcombe's call, in a private residence outside Seattle, unharmed, confused, asking for their mother more than anything else. There's no dramatic rescue, no confrontation at the door. Riker simply walks in and Kellen runs to him first, then Briggs, then finally Camden, who doesn't say anything at all, just holds on longer than either of his brothers. Simone arrives 20 minutes later and doesn't let go of any of them for a long time. She looks at Riker differently after that. Not because of what he has, because of what he did without being asked to, and because he stayed exactly when staying cost him the most. Riker meets his grandfather one final time, alone, no security, no lawyers, in the same study with the same chessboard. "You chose wrong," the chairman says quietly. "I chose the only thing that was ever really mine," Riker answers. "You built an empire that could survive anything except love. If power costs your children, you were never truly powerful. You were just afraid, and you called it strength." The chairman doesn't respond. For the first time in Riker's life, the old man has nothing to say at all. 6 months pass. The company that remains under Riker's name is smaller now, leaner, built without the syndicate's money or its silence. Every contract public, every account transparent. It earns less, costs him less sleep. Mornings look different too. Burnt toast some days because Riker still hasn't mastered the stove. Homework at the kitchen table, Briggs negotiating for extra screen time, Camden checking everyone's math twice. Soccer games most Saturdays, Riker cheering louder than any parent on the sideline. No bodyguard standing behind him anymore. A school play in the spring where Kellen forgets half his lines and doesn't care one bit. Simone still teaches, still keeps her own apartment, her own name on the lease, her own life built entirely on her own terms. Riker never once tries to rescue her from anything. He simply shows up, again and again, until showing up stops being a surprise and starts being expected. One evening in early summer, they walk along Lake Michigan as the sun drops low over the water. The same shoreline where two strangers once fell in love before the world found a way to tear them apart. The boys race ahead across the sand. No security trailing behind them. No cameras waiting at the edge of the path. Nothing but 3 boys and the last light of the day. Kellen turns around, grinning, breathless. Dad, you're too slow. Riker laughs, really laughs, and jogs to catch up, and standing there with sand under his shoes and his son's voices carrying across the water, he isn't thinking about billions lost or empires collapsed or a grandfather who never once said he was sorry. He once believed losing his fortune was the greatest tragedy of his life. Standing beside the people who were stolen from him, he finally understood the truth. The real loss had never been his empire. It had been the years he could never get back. If the story moved you the way it moved me writing it, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Share your thoughts in the comments below and tell someone who needs a little hope today. Your story might be exactly what they're waiting to hear.